All right. Let me know when you can see my screen, Liz.
Yep, you're good to go.
Okay, great. And if you could hit the recording.
Already ahead of you.
All right, great. All right, well, welcome everybody. If you didn't catch this, Liz said earlier, we're doing something a little bit different here today. What we're doing differently in this webinar is we actually have a live audience of about 25 people. No, I'm kidding. It's a small amount of our consultants that are in the office at Pragmatic Works that don't happen to be on site with clients this week are hanging in here with us to sit in on the webinar. This is a new technology, so it's good for them to see. And this way you'll actually get some live questions and things like that, so we'll have some good interaction hopefully as we go through. And I'll make them be quiet if they talk too much. So we're doing things quite a little bit differently that way. My name's Devin Knight, and again, our topic for today is going to be looking at really some of the new features with Power BI. So there's quite a bit of changes that have happened with Power BI over the last, really just less than a month. And so we're going to look at some of those features, talk about what's different, talk about what's coming forward, and we'll talk about all things that you can know about so far. There's certainly a lot of things that are to come still. You can see my contact information here if you need to reach out to me for any reason. You'll also get my contact here on the next slide. A little bit about myself briefly here. Again, my name is Devin Knight. I run the training department at Pragmatic Works, so any kind of training that we do, whether it's on-site with customers or if it's a public facility or even virtual training, I have my hands in most of those. I'm also a SQL Server MVP and have written several SQL Server books. I also I also run a local user group here called JSUG in Jacksonville. It's the Jacksonville SQL Server User Group. And I do blog at a personal website here called devinknightsql.com. So if you're interested in all the Power BI things that are happening, you can follow me there. I do tweet quite a bit as well. So by the way, if you're not on Twitter yet and you're into techie stuff, you definitely want to get on it just for at least the purposes of keeping up with what's coming out latest in the technologies. All right. So like I said, we got several folks in the room here today, so they'll be able to ask questions live. Liz will also be happy to give us some questions towards the end, so we'll try and save some time. I have a lot of things to cover, so we'll try and save as much time as possible. If you do have questions that we're not able to get to, still ask them, because Liz will send me those questions later, and I'll respond back in a blog post where you can see how I would have responded to them. All right, so here's our plan for today. We're going to look really at how Power BI is changing. So I'm sure many of you have seen some of Power BI, whether it's Power Pivot, Power Query, Power View. In some way, you've probably interacted with Power BI. I assume at least that level. If you haven't, by the way, we have plenty of webinars that our folks have done in the past that you can get on Pragmatic Works' website to catch up on how Power BI works. Our focus here today is going to be on the new stuff. So what's new in Power BI, what's in the preview that you can actually be doing right now. So everything we're going to talk about, you can be doing now, and it's all by going to sign up at powerbi.com. Okay? We're also going to give you a little bit of a tour of the Power BI Designer, also out now, that will allow you to do a lot of neat things with Power BI, and we'll get into some more details of that towards the end, but we'll be showing that new tool here for Power BI. Okay, now don't worry, it's not that you're going to have to learn a new tool, it's actually all the skills you already have as far as Power BI. If you've learned Power BI and Power Pivot and Power View, all those skills that you already have are now going to be consolidated into one tool, so we'll talk about that. All right, so here's kind of the big shift that's happening with Power BI. So here's the current state. Before we talk about what's changing, let's talk about the current state. So the current state of Power BI, and it sounds kind of funny to say, it almost like it's something that's old. Really, Power BI is fairly new, but we're actually about to look at kind of the next iteration of Power BI come out. And this is basically V2. You're not going to have, what we're going to talk about here next is going to be version 2 of Power BI. You're not going to have the old version and the new version. Everything's going to be shifted over to the new way of doing things. Okay, so first of all, that's what I want to point out. First of all, they're the same thing. The old Power BI and the new Power BI I'm about to show you, they're one and the same. The one that you use today is kind of version 1 of the tool, and now you're going to be using version 2. So a couple of the problems that, and these are a lot of the problems that Microsoft's relayed that they heard from customers. A lot of the problems with the current Power BI is that it requires a lot more IT involvement than was intended to. So currently it's more IT focused because it requires a lot of work before you can get started. So there's too many game stoppers basically. There's too many things to stop you from really making a self-service tool. First of all, you have to go sign up for Office 365 if you don't have that. You have to go set up SharePoint Online if you intend to deploying out to SharePoint site. You got to create a Power BI tenant and Power BI sites. So there's quite a bit of showstoppers that stop people from doing Power BI now. And really, it's a service that basically consumes Excel workbooks, right? You do all your work inside of Excel currently, and you publish those things that you've created inside of Excel off to a Power BI site. And there's a few other things like Q&A from the Power BI sites that's interesting as well, but mainly it's an Excel-centric tool. Not that that's a bad thing, but that's how it works currently. And some of those have been showstoppers because you have to go through and publish off to the site that requires a lot of setup. All right. So currently, again, just the current process, you take your Excel workbook, you upload it to Power BI, it caches a copy of your workbook, it copies the Excel workbook into Power BI, and then you're able to consume it through Excel services, through SharePoint Online, or through Q&A. That's the current state of what you do. What's changing here, and how things are going to be different in the new Power BI, and this is a screenshot here of a new Power BI dashboard. What's changing is it's becoming a lot simpler to be able to develop solutions. So you'll be able to develop solutions much faster, and that's kind of what the idea of what 5 minutes to wow is. This is a term I heard from Microsoft. It's really cool. It's not something that they came up with, but it's definitely something that's a really interesting way to think about just the way that you create solutions. So think about this. The idea is literally in 5 minutes you can create an account. So you can have nothing with Power BI. I don't even have a Power BI account. I'm not doing anything. But in 5 minutes, you can provide your email address, start creating solutions. You don't have to sign up for a new tenant. You don't have to assign users. You don't need licensing. And unlike the current SharePoint Power BI service that we have now, it just works, right? Everything just kind of comes together. You sign up for an account at powerbi.com. You're able to get going very quickly. Also, the data that you can include is not just Excel workbooks. So you have a little bit more flexibility rather than just uploading Excel workbooks. There's a lot of different offerings here. You'll see software as a service, SaaS partnerships. There's a lot of partnerships that they've made with SaaS offerings, things like Salesforce and several others. GitHub is another one that allow you to tap into their APIs and pull their data directly into Power BI. You do have other data source options, so you're not limited to those. You can also pull in data sources like analysis services tabular models from on-premise data sources. This is even in the preview now. And the really cool thing about how that works is this allows you to finally apply row-level security to Power BI. So you can actually take tabular workbooks, sorry, not workbooks, but tabular models that you've developed, and you have row-level security enabled in. And if you can integrate, if you already have your Active Directory integrated with Azure, then you can tie it in together and be able to secure your data row by row at a row level inside of Power BI. That's something you could never really do before. So a lot of neat capabilities that are coming. And there's going to be more. I'm clearly only going to tell you things that are out now that you can play with now. There's a lot more. You'll probably have a lot of questions as we go through these things. Am I going to be able to answer all of them? Probably not, because there's a lot of things that I'm going to show you in this preview that are going to be improved upon. So keep that in mind as well, as if you ask, why can't you do this? Why can't you do that? This is the first public preview, so there's a lot of things that will be coming. The other really neat thing here as well is that it's now much more dashboard capable. It certainly had some dashboard features to it where you can create charts and all kinds of different not gauges, but you can create charts and line charts and bar charts and maps and things like that previously in Power BI. But now it's much more dashboard capable, where it has things like tree maps. There's all kinds of new features as far as visualizations as well. So it's a lot more dashboard capable now than it was previously. Okay. Other cool thing that you get with this, so the new Power BI also is mobile capable. And the first steps that they've done, I think you can definitely tell with the new CEO at Microsoft that they see where reality is. And you can see based on reality where their investments are going. And they've actually first invested on doing mobile device applications for, as you can tell on my screen, Apple devices. So reality is reality. If you ask, most executives that want to see this kind of information are probably using Apple devices. That's just reality. So the first investment they made as far as mobile devices for Power BI has been on the Apple side. Now, it's certainly going to come to other tools. There's nothing very public about that. It's going to come to other mobile devices as well, but the first have been into iPads and iPhones. And so basically you're able to view the dashboards that you develop anytime, anywhere from mobile devices, either on an iPad or an iPhone. And the neat thing about how this works is it can be very data-driven. So you can actually create things like data-driven alerts. I wish I could show you my phone or iPad right now to show you this, but currently on the iPhone application, you have notifications that you can set up so that if I see a certain number goes above or below a metric that I'm trying to track. If it goes below that value that I expect or above a value I expect, I want to get some kind of notification sent to my phone or my iPad. That's currently in the iPhone release of the mobile device. And you can go download these applications now. They're available. I'd recommend you go try them out because they do have some sample dashboards out there as well, so you can see what it's going to be like even if you don't have a Power BI account yet. There's also neat things like annotations. So annotations are you can, let's say you see a visualization that's interesting and you want to share it with someone else. You can take a clip of it. It actually takes the clip for you, and you can email it to someone else and let them know, hey, what's going on with this metric that we're looking at here? Why are we so low in the month of January? You can actually directly email from your phone insight that you see. One thing I really think is interesting and very useful is you can apply personal favorites from mobile devices as well. So if there are, first of all, think about seeing a dashboard on your mobile phone. It's going to be incredibly difficult to see a dashboard on a phone. So because of that, they've actually made it so you can identify favorite charts and graphs and things like that. So you can go to directly to the things you care about most. There's going to be a lot of dashboards that have all sorts of visualizations on them. But if you want to go to the things you care about most, you would go to your favorite section. So you can mark those favorites from your mobile device. Okay, a lot of advancements coming here, so I'm sure there's questions on that, but there'll be a lot of new things coming from that aspect. All right, then we're going to talk finally here about the Power BI dashboard designer, really the designer, I should say. It's not necessarily a dashboard designer. This is basically the companion app to the new Power BI. And what's different here is this is where you're going to do, where you can do a lot of your developments. You don't have to do it from here. You can still develop inside of Excel, but you have another application here to do development. So why do you have another application? This is probably the question a lot of people ask. The reason why you have this new application is because this really takes away a lot of the requirements that you had to have for Power BI. Again, the idea here with the new Power BI is dealing with some of those showstoppers that you had previously. So many of you probably work in environments where you don't have, let's say, Office Professional Plus. And currently, if you want to do Power BI from Excel, you need Office Professional Plus to be able to do that development. Also, if you might be working in an environment where you don't have all the latest and greatest Office tools. So you might not have Excel 2013. You might not have even Excel 2010. You might be working somewhere where you have Excel 2007 or, heaven forbid, something lower than that. So what the companion app gives you is it's a separate download. It's kind of like a click once application. You click, it downloads and installs it for you, or you run through the installer. And once you install it, it has all of the Power BI features solely inside of this tool. So it takes it out of Excel, so you're no longer stuck with Excel capabilities, which is good from the aspect of you can get a lot of quicker releases here. You're not so tied to Excel. And it allows you to be able to do that, again, without that Professional Plus licensing. So things like Power Query, Power Pivot, and Power View are currently available inside of this companion application we're going to talk about. This is the Power BI Designer. Now, some of the features you're going to see are a little limited right now. Trust me, Microsoft's hearing a lot about that, and you'll see some more features come into this companion app as time goes on. For instance, right now, Power Pivot is very limited inside the companion application, the Designer. Let me call it the Designer. And, but there's going to be some improvements to that. You're going to see a lot of improvements in this application. This is version 1 of the new Power BI Designer here, so you'll see much improvement with this over time. Some of the improvements that you're getting is really a major overhaul to Power View. So if you've played with Power View before, you're getting a major overhaul with Power View now. With the new Power BI, you have a ton of new visualizations. These are brand new ones that you can't currently do now. You can do all the ones you could do before, but you have these new ones that have been added to the list as well. So you can now do things like funnel charts, gauges. You could do maps before, but now you can do maps that actually have regions on them, as you can see on the far right. You can do combo charts. That was a big request for a lot of people. So previously you couldn't combine 2 different visualizations on top of each other. You can do that now with combo charts. And you also have visualizations like tree maps. Tree maps would be a great alternative to something like a pie chart. Even though you can do pie charts, I prefer you do something like a tree map. So a lot of great alternatives now and new visualizations that allow you to take your presentation layer to the next level here. All right, so I'm sure you're ready to see it. Let's spend some time now on actually walking through how to use this tool. So if you're signing up for the first time, this is your first time with Power BI. Now I'm not going to go at a pace where you can follow along here, but you would go to powerbi.com. So let me pull that up here. You would simply go to powerbi.com. So I'm going to pull it up like it's fresh here. and it might already have me signed in, so yep, there we go. I'm not signed in yet. You would simply go to powerbi.com, sign in, and as long as you provide a business email account, so you can't plug in like a MSN or Outlook.com, it has to be more of a business account from a business domain, then you can start doing your trial of Power BI now, the new Power BI. And by the way, the trial is free, so you don't have to, you don't have to plug your credit card in anywhere. You don't have to sign up for an Office 365 subscription. All of that is free in here. And we're not going to spend a whole lot of time about pricing, but I will point out to you here that as far as pricing for Power BI, it's gone down significantly, about 75% lower than it was before. And there's actually a free version of it as well. So there's going to be a paid version, which you have to pay for it now, but you'll notice the price of it is significantly lower. So it's going to be called Power BI Pro. And there's also going to be a free version of it as well that has, they call it freemium, right? So you have different limitations that might be part of the free version that don't exist in the Pro version. For example, you can see the data capacity is one limitation. Also, the number of times you can refresh the data has limitations as well. So the frequency as well as the amount of rows, there's some limitations there. So be aware of that. Even with that free one, you get a lot of great features, but it's only $10 a month to even do the Pro one. All right. I'm not going to sell you a condo. Let's move on to actually demoing what the tools look like. All right, so this is a completed version of a dashboard. Just to kind of give you an idea of what the end result could look like, this is what new Power BI looks like, as opposed to the old Power BI, which I have on my other window here. This is what the old Power BI looks like, the current Power BI. I shouldn't say old. This is the current version of what Power BI looks like from Office 365. Again, new Power BI, no requirement for Office 365. You can create dashboards like this just by signing up for it today. So how do we do this? Well, if you want to create a Power BI dashboard, you're going to start with the, first of all, sign up, powerbi.com, and then you're going to actually download the Power BI Designer. Okay, you'll notice up at the very top here, if I hit the little cog to the settings section here, you have two options as far as what you can download. You can see there's a Power BI preview designer, or a designer preview, and also there's an analysis services connector preview. We're going to mainly focus on this guy today, but just note that the second one here, this is going to allow you to, currently, it only works with Tabular, currently, but it's going to allow you to connect to on-premise analysis services tabular models, and that's how you can connect your on-premise security setup that you have to cloud data sets. Again, that's for analysis services tabular for the moment. We're going to focus in on the Power BI Designer here. All right, so I would download and install that Power BI Designer. I already have done that, so I'm just going to open it up. And when I open it up, it's going to give me a blank design surface here. Now, one thing I should point out, we do record these, so if you have to review these later, you can. As far as a recording standpoint, a lot of these things can change. So if you're watching this as a recording, this is as of February 19th, so you're going to see a lot of updates come with this over time. Now you do get a nice getting started experience with the Power BI Designer. It actually tells you here, how do you want to get started? Do you want to go open up an existing report you've created, or do you want to go get some data? I want to go get some data, so I'm going to start with this Get Data section here, and it's going to launch open really Power Query. What we're looking at here is Power Query, just in a different interface. Okay, so take what you've learned about how to do Excel, Power BI, and you're going to take those skills you've already learned, and you're going to bring those into this new Power BI Designer. So we're going to do what we could have done inside of Excel as far as pulling data in, and you'll notice as we go through Power Query that the interface itself looks very similar, if not exactly the same as the Excel Power Query add-in. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with a couple data sources. We're going to use a couple data sources here for our example. I'm going to start and pretend like I do have a database. So I have a database out there somewhere, and I want to try and enhance what that database has by going to find some data somewhere else. So let's start with a database. I'm going to pick everyone's favorite database. Okay, Access here. So I'll select my Access database I have. The reason I use that is very easy to compartmentalize and move around to different places. But I'm going to hit Connect and connect to my Access database. I happen to have a data folder here with airline performance data. So we're going to be looking at performance of different airlines, so Delta, US Air, that sort of thing, and see how often they're late, how often they're on time, that sort of thing. All right, so I'm going to select my database here, my Access database, and then the new Power Query here inside the Power BI Designer will give me the option here to select the different tables I have that are inside that Access database. You can select multiple tables, so I'll select multiple tables here. And the ones I want here are the airline, the airport, cancellation reason, date, departure block, and on-time performance. Okay. By the way, all this data is public. You can go get it from the government. It's on data.gov, and all this data is public data. So I've just kind of curated it and brought it together into an Access database. We use this in one of our classes. All right, so I've selected several tables here I want to import. I would go ahead and hit, I could load, and that would bring it directly into Power Pivot. Or if I hit Edit Query, that'll take me into the Power Query Designer where I can start manipulating some of the data. And that's what I'd like to do. I want to manipulate some of this data before I just start to try and visualize it. So I've selected the Power Query window. Now you'll notice this looks very, very, very similar to the Excel Power Query. You'll notice the ribbon up at the top is basically the same. And you'll see over here in the bottom left that we have two different interfaces. Right now we're in Power Query. That's this guy right here. But Power View is going to be the one right above it. That's the reporting tab, okay, the reporting section. And that's where you'll do Power View reports on top of what we're looking at right now. Okay, now you'll notice there's no Model tab or there's no Power Pivot tab. That may change over time. I don't know. I don't have any insight there. But Power Pivot is integrated into this as well, and we'll show you how that's done a little bit later. All right, so let's start first of all by saying we want to create some relationships, right? So I've got several different objects in here, several different data sources, and I want to create relationships between the tables that I have, okay? Now, to do that, you actually cannot do it from Power Query as far as thinking about this from a Power Pivot perspective. So think about creating relationships inside your model. If I like the tables that I've got and I want to go create relationships between them, I would go flip back over here to the Report tab. That's the first one here, the first section. And you'll notice that it's going to start importing my data. It's actually bringing the data that I have inside Power Query into Power Pivot now. All right, so that data is getting sucked into Power Pivot. It's going to live inside of Power Pivot now from inside of the designer. And it just takes a few moments to import this data. I do have a significant amount of data in here, so it just takes a few moments though. Keep in mind you don't have really any limitations as far as the amount of data you can pull in. It's more reliant on the resources you have on your laptop. So the more RAM you have, the better. But as it'll pull that in, it'll make that data local inside of my Power Pivot model. All right, so once it pulls this in, again, this will take a few seconds here, I'm going to start to create some relationships. Now, it can actually detect some of the relationships automatically for me. And you'll see up here on the top ribbon, this is where I can manage the relationships. So I'm going to go and create relationships here so that I can have all the tables that I need related to each other. Now, it can, like I said, it can auto-detect relationships, but it doesn't always find all of them. It usually bases them off of the names of the columns it appears. So some of them I'll have to create manually, and some of them it will auto-detect for me. All right, so once it gets these imported, and by the way, this is really the only aspect of Power Pivot that is inside the designer right now. So there's no data view like you have in Power Pivot. There's no diagram view. There's no formula bar for doing DAX queries. None of that is here yet. I would guess that that will come before they officially release the tool, though. All right. Wow. Didn't take very long earlier. There it goes. Now it's done. All right, so it's imported all that data into my Power Pivot model. You can see the fields showing up on the right-hand side. But currently, there's no relationships between them. So what I need to do is come up to the Relationships tab here, or the button, select that I want to manage the relationships. You'll see there's no relationships defined yet. If I hit Auto Detect, it will detect some of my relationships. So it found 3 relationships, although I have a lot more tables than that. It found 3 of the relationships that I have here. And again, it kind of based that, what it appears is it based them off the column names. So you can see these happen to have the same column names here. Now, if I want to create additional relationships, I can do it manually by hitting New here. And I can create new relationships between my performance data that I have as far as the performance of my flights. And let's say that I want to see a relationship between my date table. So I can scroll down here and say, all right, I have a flight date, and I also have a dates table. I'm going to create a relationship between my flight date and my date table and hit OK. And it defines that relationship between those 2 tables. So point is you can do this manually as well as it can auto-detect them as needed. All right, so I'm going to create one more here and we'll move on from that. But again, this is the only aspect of Power Pivot that is inside of the Power BI Designer currently. There are some other neat features that you have inside of the relationships section here that I just don't have time to spend a whole lot of time talking about, but you'll notice there's an advanced section here where once I select my relationship, you can kind of define the direction of the relationship. You can actually have the relationship defined both ways, which helps with things like many-to-many relationships. All right, so I'm going to select here my airport relationship that I have to my airport table based on the airport key. And you'll see the relationships can be defined down here. You'll also see whether the relationship is active or not. If you've played with Power Pivot, you're probably very familiar with active and inactive relationships. I'm not going to spend much time talking about that right now. All right, so I'll hit OK. All my relationships are now defined. I'll hit Close. And now what I want to do is go get some more data. So I've got data from my database. I've created the relationships. If I want to go get more data, I can either go, what I probably do here is go up to the Get Data section. So I'll go hit Get Data and tell it this time that I want to go get data. How about from the web? So I'll go from the web here and go get some data there. All right, now I was not smart enough to actually have my URL that I wanted to plug in here handy, so let me go launch that open here real quick. Bear with me for 1 second. I do have it. I just forgot to leave it open. Here's my notes. All right, so there's my URL. And basically, this is a URL that has all of the busiest airports in the United States. You can see that by the name of the URL here. So list of the busiest airports. So I'm going to pull that in from the web. So the neat thing about this, think about this from the perspective of your business. Maybe you have access to some database, right? And it has some things that are good that you like, but it doesn't have everything you need. So you have data that you've also found on the web that you want to integrate in with that data. So you can use Power Query to take those multiple data sources, pull them together, and create a relationship where you previously probably wouldn't think that was possible. So I'm going to go pull data in from this URL. I'll hit OK. It's going to show me all of the tables that exist from that web page. I'm trying to select the first one. And it even gives me a preview to show me what that data looks like. So this is the data that I'm about to import. Okay? All right, so before I just hit load, I don't want to just pull it in. I actually want to correct some problems with it because you'll notice that the column headers are in the first row here. Notice that right here. So I want to fix that. And there's a few other things I want to fix in there as well. So before I just load it in, I'm going to hit Edit Query to go take a look at how we can fix some things here. I'll also rename this. So it's an awfully long name for a query here. So I'll rename this. I'll call this just Busiest Airports. All right, so first thing here that I want to do is go ahead and fix the issue that we have here with the first row actually being my column headers. Now, I do have column headers already in here, so I could just remove the row if I wanted to by coming up to the top ribbon inside Power Query and telling it that I want to remove the top one row. So I'll tell it, hey, I just want to get rid of that first row. There's nothing in there of value to me. It's just the headers, which I already have. So I'm telling it to remove the very first row, and I'll hit OK. Now, just like you have in Excel Power Query, you'll notice the steps section here on the right-hand side. It's showing each of the transforms that I'm doing appear there for me. All right, now a couple other things I'd like to do in here is you'll see that there's a year, or there's a listing for each year and how busy as far as passengers that they had for each airport. So these are the number of passengers by year. So a little cleanup that I'd like to do here real quickly is I'm going to go clean up some of the names of these columns very quickly. Just rename these. You'll see that they have kind of a funky name on the end of them here. I'm going to take off that numeric value, and then we'll do some other fun things with this. All right, so one of the problems that you're going to see with this data set is it's not really suited very well for BI purposes. It almost looks like a final report, which it actually was. It was on a website. So what I'd like to do is take the results that we see here and make it so it's more appropriate for the purposes of a BI project that we're working on. And the way that we're going to do that is we're going to use a transform inside Power Query to take the data that we see here and basically transpose it or unpivot the data. Because right now, think about if I wanted to see the total number of passengers that I've had across all time at these different airports, I would have to drag in each one of these different years individually. When in reality, I'd like to have a column that has the total number of passengers and then a column next to it that has the year, and then the year is listed as a row and not as a column header. And that's what you can do is you can use an unpivot transform to solve this. There's a couple ways you can use the unpivot transform. You can select the columns you want to unpivot like this, or in a fairly recent release, in a couple months now, you can select the columns that you want to not unpivot or leave them alone, and you can tell it you want to unpivot the others. So it just depends on, if you have more columns that you don't want to unpivot or less columns that you want to pivot, then you can go back and forth on and decide which way you'd like to do this. So what I mean by that, by the way, is here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to select the columns that I do not want to unpivot. I'll go up to the transform section here, and you'll see here there's an unpivot columns. I don't want to do a regular unpivot. I'll hit the down arrow and tell it to unpivot the other columns, meaning unpivot the columns I do not have selected. So if I select that, you'll notice what happens here is I now have two columns here that are created. The year columns are gone. I have a column here that has the years in it. I'll go ahead and rename that year. And then I also have a column, let me zoom in on this for you, and I also have a column in here now that I'm going to name passengers. Okay? So those columns were year, 2013, 12, 11. Those were columns. I unpivoted them now to be rows inside my source here. A couple other things I'd like to do here, just remove some excess columns I don't need. I don't need the rank column, so I'll take that out. I'm also going to take the airport name out because I have that somewhere else in my data set, so I can select those two, right-click, and remove them. Okay, so we're getting a little cleaner data set. I also like to rename this. I have no idea what an IATA is. It must be some kind of code for the airports. But I'm going to rename this something that's similar to what I have in my database. So I'm going to call this airport codes. I'm a layman when it comes to airport terms, so I'll go ahead and rename it that. And I've already done my unpivot, so I've already renamed some columns. And one other thing I'd like to do with this data set as it sits right now is I'd like to change the data type of passengers. So notice how the passengers column here is left aligned. So if you think back to how Excel works, if something's left aligned, then it's not a numeric value, it's a character value. So you notice the state here, the state of Georgia, California, those are all left aligned. And the way that works in Excel is if it's left aligned, then you know it's a numeric value. That's the same thing with my passenger column here. My passengers are coming through as a string, and I want it to be a numeric value so I can do different types of calculations on it. So I'll select my passenger column here, and I'll convert it to a numeric, a whole number basically, by right-clicking on it, going over to change type, and selecting whole number here. Okay. So I've selected whole number. You can see it's converted to a numeric value, and it's right aligned. That's how numbers are aligned inside of Excel. So same look and feel as Excel here. The only other thing I'd like to do is I want to pull in, I need some way to relate this back to my other tables that I have in here. So I have an airport table in here. So you'll notice here's my airport table, or my airport query, I should say. And I do have an airport code in here, but one thing I'll let you know ahead of time, I do see occasionally an airport code appearing here multiple times. For whatever reason, I have an airport code that appears in here multiple times. So what I'd like to do is get the unique column here for airport key inside that table. And the way I can do that is by going back to my busiest airports, and what I'll do is I'll merge this query with another query and pull back the column that I want. I want to merge in the airport key from the airport table. So here's what I can do. I can go up to my home ribbon. Inside the home ribbon, there's a merge queries section here, so I'll select merge queries. It's going to tell me here's my main query that I'm looking at right now, and I can select which one do I want to merge with. So I want to merge with my airport query here, and I'm going to merge based on the airport code. So if I have a code here and I have a code here, I'm going to merge based on those two values. And it got a complete match here. It looks like it matched every value. 270 out of 270 were matched, at least the first 270. So I got perfect matches here. One thing to also point out to you here is you have options as far as how the join is done. It does more of an outer join if you leave it like this, although I have complete matches here. But if you want to do more of an inner join between these two tables, you would select this option down here where it says only include matching rows. There's a lot of other join options you can do as well if you go dig into the mQuery language. But from a UI perspective, checking that off basically does an inner join for you. So I'll hit OK. I'll do an inner join between those two tables. It's going to add in a new column here for that new table. And I can tell it of the columns that are inside that table, which ones do I want to add into this query that we're looking at right now. I really don't want all of them. I just want the key column so I can create a relationship. So I'm going to select the airport key. And I love this option that was added several versions ago. It says here, do you want to use the original column name as a prefix? So it would say, it would basically say airport key dot something. And really, I don't want to have a prefix on this column, so I'm going to uncheck that. Let me show you what it does if you don't do that. So if I leave that unchecked, or if I leave it checked, excuse me, hit OK, you'll see how it names it. It calls it new column dot airport key. Ugh, that's kind of bad. I definitely want to rename that. So had I unchecked it, it would have just called it airport key. Reason that's there is because I might have already had an airport key here already, so that could have potentially caused a problem. In my scenario here, I'll just rename this, take off new column dot airport key, and I'm good to go. All right, so I have the data that I want. All the data's in here. Now I need to finally finish this up by creating a relationship. So I've got this new busiest airports query in here. I need to create a relationship between this busiest airports and the airport table. So I'll go to the query, to the report section here again. It's going to import just the table that I've made changes to, or just the query that I've made changes to. So it's a query. It imports it into Power Pivot and becomes a table. And then I need to make sure that I create a relationship to it. So I'll come up to the Manage button here again like we did previously. And luckily, they have the same name, so if I hit auto detect, it'll actually auto detect that relationship for me. So check this out. These are one of these data sources is an Access database, excuse me, and one of them is just a table from a website. It was a Wikipedia page. So if I hit auto detect, it's still able to determine the relationship that I probably should have between those two, based on the busiest airports table and the airport table here on the airport key. It was able to detect that automatically for me. Pretty cool. All right, so I found one relationship. I'll hit close and hit close on that. Again, if it didn't auto-detect that for me, I could create it on my own. All right, so I'll hit close. All right, so we've got a decent set of queries that have been now imported into our model. Again, normally what I'd like to do is probably maybe create some calculations on the Power Pivot side if I was using Excel. But inside the Power BI Designer, those capabilities are not here yet. Okay, so just keep in mind, from a Power Pivot perspective, you can create relationships. And that's it. I would also probably want to hide some of the columns I have over here inside of it. If I was doing this inside of Excel, I don't have the capabilities of doing that yet. Okay? Again, it's a preview. It's beta still, so it's preview, I should say, public preview. Those things will come. All right, now as far as the Power View side, so that's our next step, is to actually start creating some Power View reports. Power View's had a pretty big overhaul as far as visualizations that you create. Even the existing visualizations that you would create have had an overhaul as well. So you're going to see that here as we go through. So let's start with something simple you could have done before. Let's start with something like seeing a basic bar chart. So let's say that I want to see the, let me move, go to anything here. I want to see the number of delays that I've had, and I want to see those number of delays based on the time of the day. So do I have more delays in the morning, afternoon? I don't know, but let's go find out. So I'm going to go find, first of all, where my departure delay in minutes measure is that I have here. So this is actually just a kind of an implicit measure. I'm going to bring in the departure delay in minutes. You'll notice it automatically brings that into a column chart here for me. And I can start to bring in other ways that I want to slice the data. So I said here a moment ago that I want to see this based on the time of the day. So I'd go find something like my departure block. This is just when the flight is set to leave. And I could bring in either the departure delay block in the code, or I can bring in the time. But let me point out one problem to you that once some Power Pivot integration is brought in here, we'll fix later. Right now, notice one problem that I have in here is that it's sorting based on a character value here. And normally you could fix that very easily inside Power Pivot as far as the sort order. Currently, there's not really a great fix for that. So what I'm going to do is bring in a different column that I have that actually sorts it based on the time of the day. And then I can bring in, and actually you'll notice up at the top here you can sort the column chart itself. And I'm going to tell it to sort by the block code. And check this out. Notice the nice action here whenever I change this from descending to ascending. Kind of nice little flip there. It's now sorting this based on the time of the day. So the thing I was trying to point out to you there is once there's more Power Pivot integration, I'll be able to have a sort by column where I can sort by a different column and not necessarily visualize by it. Currently I don't have that, so I'm having to use maybe a field that I wouldn't normally use to visualize the time. All right. Those things will come, I'm sure. So this is, I got a nice visualization here, nice bar chart, but I want to add to it. So if I want to add more to this and maybe perhaps make it a different type of visualization, I can change the visualization either by coming up to the visualization section up in the top ribbon. So you can see there's quite a few visualizations here. Or I can change the visualization where you see change visualization type right next to the chart. So if I select this, this gives me another way. It's the same thing, but it gives me another place where I can change the visualization, perhaps to something like a combo chart. So something you couldn't do before that you can now in the new Power BI is a combo chart. So if I select this combo chart, I can now add in different metrics that I want to analyze here. So maybe right now I'm analyzing the number of late flights that I have, which looks like most of them happen between 5 and 6 p.m. Maybe I also want to see just the pure number of flights there are. So when are most of the flights occurring? So again, I'll go back up to my table that has all my metrics in it right here. And I'm just going to say, I'm going to take the flight number here and just do a count on it. So I'm going to drag it down into the column, the line value here. Let me zoom in on this so you can see. So notice here now, with it being a combo chart, I have a column value and a line value. I can take the number of flights, which it thinks is a metric. It thinks it's going to aggregate and sum. Okay, so check this out. Right now it's summing the number of flights. Not really what I want to do. I want to count the number of flights. So I'm going to do a count on this. it's summing flight numbers. So flight number is like Delta Flight 1231, something like that. It wouldn't make sense to summarize that. So I'm going to change that to a count, and not a whole lot different there, but we can see a count of the number of flights. I'm going to make this chart a little bit larger so we can see a little better. There we go. And we're now able to see the number of flights. Looks like most of them are in the morning, and they're pretty consistent. There's a little drop here about 9 a.m., and then they peak back up around 5 p.m. where we have most of our late flights. It's kind of interesting data here to look at. Pretty neat. Now, I can add more to this if I wanted to, or if I wanted to create a brand new chart, I would click somewhere in the background here, just like you would in Excel for Power View, and I can create a new visualization here. So for my new visualization, again, I want to see the number of flights. So I'll do a count of flights here. All right. Let me make this so it's a little easier to see. All right. So I've got the count of flights down here on the bottom. Oh, one thing I do want to show you as well. Check this out. One cool thing with the new Power View, how it works, if I drag in something like just a column like state, it's automatic. Oh, and I dropped it in the wrong place there. Uh-oh, epic fail. All right, let me go move that out of here. All right, grab state. So what I was trying to show you here is if you just drag in any column, like year here, for example, if I drag year down here, it's automatically going to put some kind of measure to it. So it automatically starts visualizing it, which is kind of neat. It'll pick some measure from the table and start to visualize it. So it's pretty cool stuff. Now for my new one that I'm trying to do here, what I'd like to make this show is the number of flights and how, maybe several different metrics here. How about the number of flights, how late they are, so how many delay minutes they have, and also how about how long they take to taxi out to the runway. That's another metric I have in here. So I have several different metrics that I want to look at. I want to look here. I'll bring in the number of flights I've already got, so I'll go bring in the taxi out time. Okay, and let's say I want to visualize this in a different way. We've already done a bar chart, so let's make this into something like a scatter chart. Okay, so like a bubble chart here, basically. And so I'm looking at here the count of flights, the taxi out time, and then the last thing I'll bring in here is also the departure delay in minutes. All right, so I have three different metrics that I'm trying to visualize here. In fact, let me kind of shift things around so you can see this a little better. Okay. All right, so I've got the three metrics on here. Now I want to be able to categorize it some way. So maybe I'll bring in which airlines fell under these different metrics. So I have airlines up here. I'll bring in the airline long name. And now I'll see a different bubble here represented by each of the different airlines. Now, some of these things can be kind of deceiving based on the metrics that we're looking at. So things like taxi out time. Right now, I'm summarizing those up. But if you think about it, if I summed up the taxi out time, that could be just aggregated because Delta Airlines has more flights than everybody. Their taxi out time is higher than everyone. So maybe I could do something like take an average of taxi out time. If you wanted to do something like that, say take an average of something, I can come over here and just change the type of aggregation by hitting the down arrow and changing it from a sum to an average. And now I'm looking at the average taxi out time, which is a totally different way of looking at the data now. So very interesting things you can kind of plug in here. All right, so the sheer number of flights that I have looks like, as far as my data set, Southwest has the most flights for my data set, so don't assume anything just globally. Delta is right behind it, and then you can see all these other lower airlines in here. Now, just like the previous Power View worked, you can click on things like the bar chart. So I can click on the bar chart here, and you'll see it modifies and filters my line chart. My bubble chart here, or scatter. Or I can select something like Delta Airlines and notice how it filters down my line chart. So all that stuff that you had previously still works. One thing I'll point out to you that doesn't exist here that you have in the older Power View is there's no play axis currently on the scatter chart. A lot of people like the play axis, but it's just not here yet. Okay, so just be aware of that. All right, so we've got a couple nice things in here. Let's add one more thing to this report before we move on to another one. I want to see why some of these flights have things like cancellations, why, maybe when they were canceled, how it impacted things. So I'm going to bring in the cancellation reason. I'm just going to bring in that. Okay, so let me actually take out the metric for a moment. All right, so here's my cancellation reason. Right now it's trying to visualize this as a chart. That's the default go-to, is I want to visualize this as a chart. In the old Power View, its default is go visualize it as a table. So what I'd like to do here, though, is I want to make this into more of a filter. So you do have slicers here. So I can select a slicer, and I can filter down this as you have done in the previous Power View to slice the data as a filter. So if I want to see things like, were the number of flights that had security issues? Looks like none. Which ones had weather issues? Well, there were some that had weather issues, so you can see some value into that. Which ones had no issues, not canceled? Which one had national air system problems? So you can see different ways to filter that based on the slicer here. All right, so I'm going to unfilter that. You can hit the little clear filter here to remove that filter. All right, so we got a decent looking report here. Let's create a new one. We're going to do that by creating a new page up here in the top ribbon. I'll select new page. And for this new one, what we'll do is we'll take our data again and maybe create a map. All right, so I'll do this one a little bit faster here. I'm going to go to my airport data, and I'll bring in the states as well as the city. Notice here it automatically put it on a map for me based on the fields. So you can see here it recognized them as geographical fields. And I'll bring in city here as well. Right now, notice again that it's automatically summarizing based on the airport key. That was the only number column it could find in there. I don't really want to summarize on airport key. What I'd rather do is summarize based on something like the delay minutes. So let me go find where my delays are, or my delay time is. So right here, departure delay in minutes. I can check that off. And now I'm looking at a map. Let me make this a little larger for you. All right, now I'm looking at a map here that I can zoom into, see where all my departures are occurring. Okay, so you can see which states have the most departures, and check this out just like you can do inside of the traditional Power View. You can double-click on a state, for example. If I double-click on Texas or California, it'll zoom into that based on my report that I've defined here and show me all of the cities where those delays are occurring as well. It looks like most of the delays are actually in Houston. If I want to drill back up, you'll see there's a little drill up icon up here, and you can drill back up. You'll also notice there's a little filter option here where you can filter and you can select multiple values you want to filter. There's some filtering differences here than you would have in traditional Excel. We'll spend some time talking about that, but for right now, let me point out to you that this filtering you can do from the web. So from the web Power BI, you can do this, but you can't do it from the Power BI Designer. If you want to filter in the Power BI Designer currently, you would come over to this filter section here, and basically you drag the field you want to filter up into the filter section. Okay, I'm not so concerned about showing you the filter section right now. All right, let's see some new visualizations you haven't seen before. So some new ones that you haven't seen. We saw the combo chart. Let's also see like a funnel chart here. So I remember I brought in a second data set that had the busiest airports. So let me bring in something like the total passengers. And let's also see something like which city they're in. So major cities served. Okay, so I'm seeing which city I had the busiest airports. If I want to change it to a funnel chart, I can come up either to the ribbon and do it or right next to the chart and tell it I want to make this a funnel chart. Okay, it looks kind of odd like that. So if you want to sort it, you can tell it you want to sort by up top here, and I want to sort by the number of passengers. And I'll do it descending. All right, so I'm now looking at a chart here that shows me each of the cities and the total number of passengers. You can select this, and it will filter down the map. So notice the map here is highlighted based on what I have selected. I must have clicked somewhere in, I picked LAX or Los Angeles, and you'll notice it's only showing California over here. So those things work together still just like they would a column chart. But this is your new funnel chart that you have. You can hover over it, it gives you little tool tips, it shows you the percent of total and things like that. It's a pretty nice new chart you have in here. All right, let's do another new one you haven't seen yet. So let's do another new page. And for this last one here, let's do a tree map. These are pretty cool type of reports. So I'll select something like the departure delay in minutes again. That's our primary measure that we care about. And I'll bring in maybe the departure block time. So I have the time when the flight's left here. And that is, I keep skipping by it, right here. All right, so I have the departure block time I'll select. And I also will bring in the airline. Let's see which airlines are having these issues. So I'm going to make this, first of all, I'm going to make this a tree map. Okay, kind of nice. So I can see the size of the block represents where most of the flights are occurring, or where most of the delays are occurring, I should say. And then if I wanted to, I can add another level to this, and I can say, well, let me see what airlines were causing this. So I'll bring in the airline name as well into the detail section here, and it lets you take an extra detailed level into that. So not only am I seeing where the delays are occurring, but now I can see which airlines are causing the delays. So I can see here, this one's Delta from 5 to 6 p.m. had this many delay minutes. WN, I don't know what that one is. Anybody know what WN is for an airline? Western, okay. So that's I've never heard of that one. So there's some interesting things you can do where you can actually nest some of these as well. So pretty cool. So this is the new Power BI Designer. Now here's your next step. So your next step from here is I would save this. Okay, so I'd save this designer file. Okay, so I already have one completed out here. Let me call this one my live demo. That's the oh crap, something happened where everything broke right there, the completed one. Let's call this the live demo, and I'll save this. So I've saved the workbook, or so I shouldn't say workbook. I've saved the designer file. And now I can go back over to my Power BI site. This is the new Power BI, and I can tell it I want to go get the data. So I can select Get Data. And here you'll see all the options you have as far as pulling data in. You can pull in from an Excel workbook. So if you have an Excel workbook already, you can easily bring those over to the new Power BI. Okay, you can also pull in from the Power BI Designer file, which is what we've just created. You can pull in from Analysis Services. And then these are all those SaaS providers. So things like Salesforce or Microsoft Dynamics or Zendesk. Those are kind of those SaaS providers you can connect to. And they have some pre-built dashboards in there for you if you choose those. All right, so I'm going to choose to connect to a Power BI Designer file. I'm going to do this part kind of quick so that we can have some time for questions. I'll select my live demo Power BI file. This is a new type of file here, PBIX. It's Power BI Designer file. I'm going to pull that in and connect that. It takes a few moments, and it's going to pull that into Power BI, and then we'll be able to create some dashboards on it. So these are just some reports that we've created, but if you want to build some dashboards that have multiple reports that are tied together, you can start to select the reports, and then you can pin reporting items to a dashboard. You also do have Power BI Q&A. So if you've played with Q&A before, the question and answer tool, that lets you talk to your data basically, you can do that from Power BI here as well. All that is in the new Power BI. Okay? So this does take a few moments here to upload, but once it does, I'll show you how you can take these reports that we've already created. You can actually modify those reports here. You can modify them from the web. You can create reports from the web, so you don't have to go to the Power BI Designer, but you can, so you get a little bit more advanced. But you can see, once we brought this in, I have my data sets down here. So there's really three sections: data sets, reports, and dashboards. Data sets is just your connection to your data. Report, by the way, you can schedule refreshes. There's some limitations there, but that's going to be expanding, obviously. Reports is like what we've designed earlier, so you'll see my reports that we built earlier. Okay, so check this out. This is all the reports that we built early, and you can modify them. You'll see that over here on the right. And then dashboards are going to be created as you look at your report. So as we look at the reports that we have here, check this out. Here's one of the reports that we built. Let me go back here and kind of jostle its memory. So let me go to the reports again. I don't think I gave it enough time to kind of render everything out. And once it pulls up the reports, you can start to tell it, oh, I like this one for my dashboard, or I would like to see this one in my dashboard. You can include some of these visualizations, leave them out. They don't all have to be part of your dashboard. The neat thing about it is when you include them in your dashboard, check this out. Let's find one of these here. If I pin this to my dashboard, for example, okay, it's now pinned it to my dashboard. I can now go, let's say, for my map, and I want to pin something from my map. Let's pin my map to the dashboard as well. I can go zoom in on that. Let's pin that to the dashboard, just the little pin icon here. Oh, and let's see if it says the dashboard is read-only. Let's see if it actually pinned those. We'll check it out here in a minute. But as I pin those onto the dashboard, they'll now appear on my dashboard that I find up top here called Live Demo. Looks like it didn't pin them, so let me see if I can do that one more time. I think I needed to actually edit the reports. Okay. And then once you pin them, they easily allow you to start to visualize them on a dashboard. Let me see if I can grab one more thing in here. Okay. So it's going a little bit slow. Let me just go show you a completed one here. I already have one out here that's done. I don't want to wait too long. Once they're out here, they would appear something like this. This is actually one that's based off of a Salesforce. And you can have all your visualizations, you can pin them onto the dashboard, and once they're on the dashboard, you can click on them, and it'll actually drill through into that report that we showed you a few moments ago. So this would be an example of the report that we created that you can drill into. So you can pin individual items, they show up on the dashboard, and then you can select them to go into the more detailed report. You'll also notice these things up top here. These are actually part of Q&A that you can pin to a dashboard as well. So for example, from our live demo that we did a moment ago, I can type in something like total departure delays. It brings back that number here, and I can pin that to my dashboard. It pins that to my dashboard for me. I can ask multiple types of questions here. So maybe I say total departure delays in 2012. There's my departure delays in 2012. I can select that. I could be more specific. Let's say I wanted to see in January in 2012. If you haven't seen Q&A, by the way, did I misspell something? January. If you haven't seen Q&A before, and I'm doing something silly there, that's okay. If you haven't seen Q&A before, watch one of the webinars we have on it. It lists what Q&A produces for you on your dashboard. And you don't have to keep this guy here. I can just look at these. You can increase the size or lower the size of these things very easily in here, and the other visualizations can be included. And you can continue to ask questions up top here. All this will come through to your mobile application. So if you have a mobile Power BI app that you've already downloaded that Microsoft has created, these things will be surfaced through there as well. And again, you can create things like data alerts on there, so you'll know exactly when this number goes above a level or below a level. So pretty neat stuff that you can do in here. Okay, and again, this is kind of a final. Here's what the end result could look like here. Okay, so we only have, I know I kind of rushed through part of that. We only have 5 minutes left here, so I want to make sure I save some time for questions. I'll take some questions in the room here if we have any first, and then I'll take Liz if you want to start queuing them up for from the webinar itself.
Sounds good.
Any questions? You guys have any?
I got one.
Yeah.
So what if you have Power BI built in the current older version? Is there any migration process or anything as the new one rolls out?
Yeah, great question. So Liz, can you hear his questions?
Yeah, but just have him speak up a little bit more.
Okay, I'll repeat that one. So the question was, if you've already done Power BI now, and you need to, and by the way, this is a replacement, not an additive thing for Power BI. This is going to replace the existing Power BI. So if you already have some, you're going to be pulling things into this. Now, from what I hear, there's no details. You are going to migrate into this new tool. I don't know any more details. Or I can't share any more details than that. You can take, if you've done Excel workbooks that have Power View and Power Pivot in it, you can upload them in here, and it takes like the Power View report and converts it to the new way Power View looks, and then you can add new things to it. So it will take, where I showed you earlier where you have, you can pull in data from Excel workbooks. You'll notice here one of the things that it will support, here a list of things it supports that you can pull in. So it'll pull in Power Pivot models, Excel data models, Power View reports, and when you pull in Power View reports, it converts them to the new looking Power View reports for you. Any other questions in the room? All right, Liz, what you got?
This question was asked several times. People want to know when this is going to be available outside the U.S.
Okay, so I don't know the answer to that. There is a, on the Power BI site, I believe you can find which countries it is supported in. So for those of you who are not in the U.S. and you haven't tried to sign up yet, when you go to sign up, it's not available in the U.S. I would expect it very soon. I don't know a particular date that I can give you, unfortunately. So not a good answer for that, but it's the truth.
All right. Someone wants to know why it's online rather than being able to download it.
Wonder which they didn't say which part was online?
It was in the very beginning of the presentation, so maybe, I don't know if that helps.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Maybe they're talking about the designer. So the designer itself is you download it. So you download it and then it's on your machine local. So this is actually locally on my machine. This is not online. I'm not in a web browser now. You can do these things in a web browser. So I could have easily created all those reports that I just did from the web browser if I had just uploaded the data set. I could have then gone into Explorer and started to create some reports on top of it. So you have the ability to do it online as well. But the Power BI Designer allows you to do it more from an application on your desktop. So maybe they need to have a follow-up question there, but it's really both. You can either do it online or on the designer here.
Okay.
Hopefully that gets on.
Yeah. Can a data model already built using Power Pivot be imported into Power BI Designer?
Okay, good question. So I tried, actually I didn't know the answer to that until yesterday. So I tried it. It cannot, from what I can tell, and I'm sure we might have some Microsoft folks on here, and I'll be happy to correct myself if they can tell me I'm wrong. But from what I can tell, that's not possible. So from the designer, so specifically from the designer, if you go under Get Data, you do have Excel in here, but it wasn't pulling in the data model for me. You also do have analysis services in here, but it does not pull in, where to go, database. You do have analysis services in here, but it's not Power Pivot. You can't do it from the designer as far as I can tell. I'd be happy to correct myself if someone can answer me on that. So no Power Pivot imported into here, but you can do it from the web. So from the web, and this is actually what I was showing just a moment ago. From the web, if I go to Get Data and tell it Excel Workbook, you'll see here that it does pull in data models, and then it'll make that data model your source, and you can just start to build things on top of it. From what I could tell, that's not possible from the designer itself currently. But again, someone can correct me. All this stuff, by the way, is just a couple weeks old. So a lot of new things. I know I'm going to have questions that I won't necessarily be able to fully answer, but the Power Pivot models can come into the web, but not from the designer.
Okay. Manage relationships. Will it be end-user effort, and can data relationships be reused?
Okay, so the relationships, is it something an end user can do? I think is what's being asked. They certainly can. It's inside the designer here, which I think you guys saw. The designer stuff here isn't overly complicated. We did do some stuff in Power Query, but really the relationships should hopefully help you be able to be auto-detect. Now you kind of saw the conditions on when it did and didn't auto-detect those earlier. This is something I think a user certainly can hit auto-detect. And they'll realize pretty quickly if something doesn't have a relationship. If they try and drag two things that are unrelated into the designer and they just don't connect, or the data doesn't look right, it probably means there's no relationship. So they would need to pull those in. Now, as far as creating them new, if they needed to, we showed you how to do that, where you can create the new relationships. I guess it's a question of how tech savvy your users are. If they're pretty Excel savvy, they might be able to understand how to use relationships. If relationships is just a completely brand new concept to your users in general, then probably not. So it kind of depends on the savviness of your users.
Okay. It seems like the data is getting imported into the cloud. Is there a way that the data can be imported locally? They don't want sensitive information out there.
Sure. So yes, it can. If you're using, now it does surface the data in the cloud. So it's got to be presented. If you're using Power BI, it's being surfaced through the Power BI site in the cloud. But if you're really interested in having on-premise data not imported into the cloud, but you want to have it on-premise and maybe leverage security and things like that, then you're going to be going, at least at the current time, you'll be needing to do the analysis services connection that we see here. So again, this analysis services connection allows you to connect to an on-prem tabular model you have. So at least currently it has to be tabular, and that would allow you to connect to on-premise data that you have. It's not pushed into the cloud.
Are the Power BI?
Microsoft can correct. So no, it's okay. I took a long pause there. Someone from Microsoft can correct me if I'm incorrect there in any way, but that's my understanding of it.
Okay. Are the Power BI designer files able to be deployed hosted on a prem SharePoint BI portal?
Okay, good question. So can any of this be done on-prem right now? The answer is no. So you can't take something from a Power BI designer file and try and publish it to your SharePoint 2013, 2010. None of those interact with this version of Power BI yet. So you can't take it to current SharePoint releases right now.
Okay. What is the best practice when it comes to data quality, versioning, product support for projects based on Power BI?
So versioning, data quality. Okay, so big question. Data quality and self-service BI is a big, it's an issue, right? So when you have self-service, these are users that are pulling in data, and the data quality is kind of left up to where they pull the data from. So it's definitely an issue. Is there a good solution for it right now? Not really, because they can get data from a self-service perspective. They can get data from wherever they want, as I did. I did a moment ago. I pulled in data from Wikipedia. We all know that's reliable. So it certainly can be an issue. There are some things within inside, and I think you'll see these things coming in the new Power BI. But in the current release of Power BI, there's things called a data catalog, where you do have some capability. And this is, by the way, this is taking Power Query queries. So you can take a Power Query, publish it off to your current Power BI site, and there is a level of, how I should say that, there's a role called a data steward, where you can actually have that person can approve or deny queries that are published off to the Power BI site. So if they intend on sharing queries with other people, they have to be approved first, and that's great, because otherwise you'll have 10 different people publishing the same query off to the Power BI site. So there's a little bit of oversight to that. And that's one way you can do it now in the current Power BI. You'll see some of that, I would assume, also come into the new Power BI as well.
All right, I think we'll go ahead and wrap it up. So if your questions didn't get answered, we'll make sure that Devin posts the blog with them. We're about 5 minutes over. Several people asked if this would be recorded. Yes, it will be. It should be on our website, hopefully by end of day tomorrow.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Liz.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.